Welcome back, everybody. You got Will and I, man, here from the Block Runner, and today we're going to be talking about Aragon. But first, let's dive into this little blue square that got decimated just this morning.
So much for your meme rectangles, dude.
Yeah, man. So I guess whoever's like manipulating the market is not paying attention to this channel. So
Yeah.
that's the issue. So yeah, this indicates that it's supposed to keep going down, but
I mean, yeah, we broke the little support we had, I guess, right?
yeah,
So like 52K or something, 54K,
yeah, 52. Yeah,
54. So I don't know, man. We might be in for some
a little bit
what,
more
what what
blood.
we've speculated on at the beginning of the month, right? March is supposed to be notoriously like the worst month of the year,
Yeah.
which I'm starting to understand why now, right? Like a lot of these a lot of crypto projects and entities and startups are getting the bad news this month as far as their tax obligations and whatnot.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like behind the scene liquidation going on to pay for these
Yeah.
obligations. So it makes sense why March is like historically such a bad month.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty
So
consistent. But you know what? So far this month it's up this month technically.
yeah, true.
So
Well, I mean, it's not over yet, dude. So that fuels my speculation that we have more
more
more downside pressure
That's true.
coming
That's
in the
true.
next week or so, maybe next couple of weeks. So
But here in the United States, I think the deadline was extended a month. So we might see blood even in April.
potentially, yeah. Which to me, I'm perfectly cool with, man. I am perfectly fine if we revisit this green line again.
Yeah,
If,
41,000.
yeah, if we retest that green line, I'm perfectly cool with that. All that's doing is prolonging this cycle a little more, so that we're not completely front running expectations. We're not just fully parabolic
Yeah.
so early because
Yeah.
we already did the moon math, right? If that were the case, our top out would be like 120, 150 or something
Yeah, that's
for
true.
for Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So the longer this consolidation period goes on,
The
you
higher
know,
the upside.
the higher the top side upside is. It
Yeah.
correct? So
That's
I'm
right.
totally cool with this.
All right. So let's get into Aragon. So what first attracted you to this, man? Like, why are we talking about governance?
Well, dude, you know me, man. This is my favorite part of crypto is the governance aspect of it. I've always been the most interested in this,
Yeah.
just because it's such a the implications of us as an industry, as a community, figuring out how to govern all of this stuff that we talk about, like govern from a community level, not so much the standard hierarchical methods that we're
Yeah.
used to in the real world. Once we can figure this out and that ecosystem matures, we have all the right tooling and the infrastructure in place. Like, man, that can be applied to the broader realm outside of cryptocurrency. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of human organization is a community. So like up until this point in time, there wasn't like an alternate model to kind of explore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we have a little bit of exposure to Aragon simply because of Decentraland. So they were using that as a platform, and so we've actually used this to a certain extent in our day-to-day activities with Decentraland. But what's fascinating is if you go to their websites, there's actually two of them, and they're consolidating to one. Right, one is Aragon, which is ANT, and the other one's ANJ, which is Aragon Court. And so just recently, like within the last few months, they're starting to consolidate ANJs into ANTv2. So, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of this conversation as to why that happened, other than the fact that the two market caps for each one, for ANJ is at 22 million, and then for ANT, it's at 369 million. So the incentives for using each token has a conflict for this becoming a juror for Aragon. So now that they're consolidating, you can become a juror just using ANTs. But we'll get into what we're talking about here. So most importantly, if you go look at these websites, you start making the realization, which is surprising yet not surprising, that a decentralized community is starting to formulate and consolidate into a group of governing body.
Mm.
And that's like the most fascinating thing, that we can govern ourselves and we have the technology to do it. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah. So the technology is in the works, right? So it's more of like adoption at this point. If the community, the broader decentralized ecosystem as a whole, can show signs of adopting this framework,
Mm-hmm.
then that's the point of maturity that I'm talking about. So like it's kind of like we all have to accept these universal, protocols, I guess, and abide by them, right? Just like we do in the real world.
Right.
We all collectively understand the law of the land, and we all act in accordance,
That's
right?
right.
Because we know if we go against the law, there's consequences.
That's
and
right.
there's governing bodies in place to impose that law. So we got to figure out how to do this in a decentralized ecosystem.
Yeah, so we're looking at Deep Down now, and these are all the projects that are using Aragon, right? And so if you scroll down through this list, most of these projects are using Aragon. And so there's obviously some competitors to Aragon like DAOstack and Moloch. But for the most part, we got a majority like understanding that Aragon is like the deciding factor in terms of decentralized autonomous organizations.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting here for Barnbridge, they're independent. So you can govern yourself using independent understandings, right? Independent like technologies, right? So it's
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
up
I
to the
think,
project, I guess.
yeah, I just think they haven't committed to a singular.
Oh, really?
I, I mean, I think if you go to Aragon's website and you look up their list of like integrators, I guess you're gonna see Barnbridge on that list if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because I remember we were looking at Deep Down just a couple of weeks ago, and they were using Aragon. So I don't know if this is a new development or what.
Yeah.
But
Regardless, like you're saying, for sure the majority is in Aragon. I think Aragon was one of the first.
one of the first ones, yeah.
So yeah, usually that's usually the to be expected, right? The first mover
Right.
usually always has like the strongest network effects.
Yeah.
Oh look, there's Barnbridge logo right there, dude.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
So
So I think it might be a new development that it says independent now.
potentially, yeah.
But so let's take a look at this court thing. So this is a manifestation of a group of people coming up with a way to govern each other on disputes. And so in the case here is that Aragon Court handles subjective disputes that require the judgment of human jurors. These jurors stake a token called ANJ, which is now ANT, which allows them to be drafted into juries and earn fees for successfully adjudicating disputes. So this isn't like the most, entertaining way to spend your time for most people. But obviously, there's a sector in the economy that do like figuring out the disputes or figuring out like who wins in a given dispute. And so, this is a place for those people to potentially earn an income.
Who are these people?
Jurors, anyone who's looking to.
Well, nobody volunteers to become a juror, do they? I mean, it's like we're just kind of forced.
Well,
to
in this
do
case,
that.
they do. You do
In
have
this
to
case, they
volunteer.
do, yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the monetary incentives, right? Otherwise, who the hell would want to sit through disputes like you're saying? Like,
Yeah.
usually cases not relevant to yourself. So in most cases, we're all busy people, right? We don't have the time to be like, all right, this sounds like a cool hobby to have. I want to hear what Bob and Alice are fighting about today.
Yeah.
And I want to, be a part of that decision.
You know what? But there are TV shows that like had a lot of people watching for like, $2,000 disputes.
Like Judge Judy and shit like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true, man.
So I guess this could be a form of entertainment. I mean, I wonder.
I hope not.
I wonder what's the logistics of having this conversation is all like text based, evidence based, and you just like make a decision without like having a conversation with anybody.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the infrastructure that the Aragon platform is building.
Yeah.
All of the tooling necessary to get to funnel all these disputes or to handle all of the like expected organization chores, I guess, like you would expect from like a standard company, right? Like treasury management, voting within like within the organization of a company itself. Like in a centralized entity, it's much easier to like facilitate these things, right? Because it's top down structured.
Yeah.
So there's got to be the infrastructure in place for the community to kind of like catch wind of all of these core issues, I guess you would call them,
Mm-hmm.
and to participate in like the actual execution of them. So that's what Aragon does. Now the Aragon courts is a little more specific, right? Like this can be applied to
the application of governance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what's interesting here is that the incentive mechanism sort of is a little peculiar. Just understand like how this works. So if you go through this example, Bob and Alice have a dispute. Alice ends up winning in this case. Yeah. And then the jurors who staked their ANJ tokens for the loser ends up losing their staked tokens, and it gets distributed to the other jurors.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an incentive to vote with the majority. And so if the jurors collude, I mean, pretty much anything can happen at that point.
Yeah, there is a problem with that in the sense that yeah, there could be some kind of weird because it's kind of like pay to win aspect, right? In the sense that like the more you allocate or the more you stake, I guess like the more cases you're going to be assigned to. I think
Yeah, that's true.
so. There's that. Yeah. So I'm not 100% sold on the model yet in the sense that yeah, the financial incentive aspect could possibly be gamed and manipulated potentially, like
But
not not for the best interest of like the actual dispute itself,
right,
right?
right. It's not
Potentially.
based on evidence. But of course,
Yeah.
it can be appealed just like any other court. So
Yeah.
if you appeal and you show evidence of collusion, then everybody's like screwed.
Correct. So I
So
mean, this is like as infant as like things get. Everything in crypto is infant, right? But this is like governance
yeah, yeah.
implications. Like,
This is baby.
it usually takes like emerging civilizations like generations to figure out governance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
So
sure.
there's probably going to be a lot of holes and a lot of like experimenting, a lot of like, dude, this is not optimal. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But
Yeah, and
you got to start somewhere.
I don't think we figured it out as a governance. Like we've had centuries of governance and everything has holes
That's
in
right.
it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It never really does get figured out, right? But regardless, like if we're actually going to live up to the decentralized nature of like all these dApps and stuff we're building,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be that infrastructure. Because think of each DAO as like it's like a new country that's forming, right?
Yeah,
It's just
that's right.
a collective of people that are all aligned, I guess, in their goals. But you as the user of these applications, like there's no actual country you can go to handle these disputes. You can't go to the United States Supreme Court because
Yeah.
you feel like Uniswap is like, discriminating against you based on your fucking sexual identity or something like that,
Yeah.
like just they can't do that. So this decentralized environment, we need that Supreme Court level of decision making. You know what I mean? We
Yes.
need that
Yes.
umbrella that the rest of us have to abide by. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So for any project that wants to officially decentralize, you got to decentralize your governance. And so Aragon is the way to do it, right? Aragon is a service of governance.
Yeah.
And I mean, they built out everything so that you don't have to. And I'm sure there's a level of integration to which, like, if you're a project and you're a decentralized project, you have to have some stake in the game in terms of like governance. And so I'm sure that if somebody rules against the project has to pay some sort of penalties. And
Yeah.
they have to pay those penalties because they're integrated in a way with Aragon that forces those penalties to be paid. Right? It's not like you hold the private keys and then you have to opt to like follow the rules. It's more like, it's programmed, right? It's programmed governance.
And it's probably like reputation based too, and not yet, but in the future it
Yeah.
could be, depending on how big these protocols become. Like Aragon could
Absolutely.
become viewed as like the next I don't want to label it as like United States, just because like in the traditional world, United States in recent times has been
Yeah.
perceived as like the de facto of justice, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, like maybe like one of the more fair judicial systems
Yeah, it depends
in
who
the
you
world.
ask, right?
Depends who you ask, right? But there's a reputation there, right, to be associated with that kind of governance
Yeah.
in a way. So like you as a project, you're part of the Aragon ecosystem. Your DAO is, so your user base should know that and maybe feel a little more comfortable interacting with that protocol in the sense that if there's ever a dispute that I have in the future, I know this application is affiliated with the Aragon, ecosystem. So
Mm-hmm.
at least I have a channel to go to if I want to handle a dispute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, you as the app, if you're misbehaving or whatever, you're not abiding by the actual, the judicial rulings of Aragon, there's got to be like a slashing mechanic, right? Either if it's reputation based or financial.
Yeah, so on this channel we like to talk about like pillars of the crypto economy, and one of those
Yeah.
pillars are things like Chainlink and the graph and lit tree, identity. Just like you were just talking about how you typically stake tokens in order to return yield. And in the case of governance, you would stake your reputation
Mm.
on a decision, right? And if the decision goes against your way, your reputation takes a hit.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, yeah, how do you enforce these decisions, right? It's not like there's like a,
you
you
can
know,
slap people's
FBI.
hand. Yeah.
There's no FBI knocking on your door as a DApp, right? Like that's the whole point. Who are they gonna knock on, right?
Yeah.
But if you want to maintain like the reputation, you know, among like your peers, I guess,
Yeah.
like of other protocols, then you've got to abide by the collective sentiment, you know?
That's right. That's right.
That's it. So we're like in the very beginning stages of like establishing that standard. You know what I mean?
And so now governance is going to be another one of those like foundational pieces in cryptocurrency that we need to understand and comprehend and recognize where the problems are, because if we're going to see a decentralized future in any way, it starts with governance.
Totally. And it's like one of the most overlooked and like ignored, just because it's not
as sexy
at all.
Yeah.
This is not fun, dude. Like governance and politics, this is shit you usually leave up to the graybeards. You know what I mean? We as a people, we show up once every 4 years, you know, to voice our opinion at the ballot box, and that's about it. That's the extent of what we want to interact with this kind of shit. But I mean, now we're also all speculators. If you think, you know, Aragon is going to become that de facto, you know, governance standard, and you're going to see all these protocols integrating with it, which there's a good track record to suggest that could be the case.
Yeah.
You know,
but dude, check this out. This
Yeah.
is digitizing like the analog aspect of voting, right? So there could be 10x traction here because there's money at stake. Like if you're involved in a project like Barn Bridge, and there's something for voting, or there's some dispute that could potentially hit your wallet, you're going to be incentivized to go and vote. You're going to be engaged, and there's a technical model to engage with that voting, right? This DAO, right? So I think you might see a lot more traction in governance on DAO type projects than you would otherwise see in governance in like traditional like worlds, right? With like the United States. So
yeah, and we could definitely see like a merger as far as like the on-chain identity things we've been talking about up until this point, where if you have that track record of historical participation in like, you know, internal governance within the DAOs that you're involved with, that could potentially be factored into the future. Like if you're trying to become a juror in the actual, like, you know, the higher level disputes, like it shouldn't just be 100%, you know, financial
absolutely.
weight, right? Like there should be some reputation weight allocated as well.
100%.
And that's where the on-chain identity comes from.
Absolutely.
So we just discovered another use case for, you know, on-chain identity, essentially.
Hell
like
yeah.
It's a big deal.
Hell yeah. So hopefully you guys learned something about Aragon, and let us know what you think. Do you think DAOs are going to be huge in the future, or, you know, do you have another model of governance? Let us know in the comments. Like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter @TheBlockRunner and also at MetaZone.io, and we will catch you in the next video.
Peace.